Looks normal.
It looks normal.
Oh, looks normal to us. Yeah.
Great. Even better, because all the notes I made, I held them up and went, uh-oh. So this is me. I'm Madame Onça, and I have spent a lot of years studying tarot. It is one of those things that, you can, with a bit of practice, you can develop an enjoyable working relationship with the cards. And if you get really excited about it, then, there's a vast amount of history and there's a never ending study of the cards that you can do. So you really get to decide if you want to sort of be a dabbler or if you want to go tarot crazy, in which case I can point you to all kinds of resources. In my own life, I have gone in and out over the years of being very immersed in tarot sort of lore and culture, and then having to go do other things for a while. And thanks to the pandemic, I've really been in it quite a bit for the last year. So it's been exciting to get my thoughts collated. And in fact, there's another iteration of my deck is about to come out in about a month, hopefully. So I've been deep in making a lot of artistic decisions about tarot. So I started working with cards, dare I say, probably 25 years ago. And does everybody have a deck with you? Also, you don't have to, but do you happen to?
Yes.
Okay.
I have. Yeah.
So most legitimate tarot decks, meaning not like, Wish knockoffs, are going to have some version of a little tiny book that comes with it. Often this is a much smaller book. Some sort of little white foldy accordion page type thing. You want to have some kind of reference, or the internet if you don't have something. Obviously, the thicker the book, the more information you're going to get. But having some basic resources available to you can be a real boon. At this moment, I will point you to the Golden Thread Tarot, which is a free app that you can put on your phone. The art, I'm going to say it's very sort of Silicon Valley, but it's a beautifully designed app. And not only can you use it to pull a card a day, and, it's got great tools for journaling with that and so forth, but it also just has a lovely shorthand. So if you're doing tarot readings for yourself on the go, you can actually use that app as a quick glossary to look up what cards mean as well. I still use it for cross-reference when I'm stuck. I'm like, what aspect of this card am I not thinking of? So the Golden Thread, totally free, brilliantly laid out. Like, I would like to lay out an app, but I feel that the bar has been raised so high by the app, that I would have to be very good friends with a very good developer in order to present something that isn't already offered by that product, because it's pretty fracking cool. Cool. So so that's a great tool. I will talk during this course over the next 4 weeks. I'm going to refer a lot to the assumption that you're building a tarot practice. Don't feel pressured to do that, but I've taught dance for many years, whatever your discipline, obviously the more time you put in, the more facility you're going to get with the material. But don't feel bad if you don't get to it in between classes or whatever. Again, we all have to sort of do what we can when we can, and know that these things are cyclical. But if you are able, I would like to encourage you to develop a tarot a day practice, like a daily practice. And if not, then a weekly practice. Maybe when we're done, you get yourself a cup of tea or pour yourself a glass of wine and sit down and read cards, or maybe it's a thing you do for yourself on a quiet evening. It's really great to have a deck to work with. It's useful to have some kind of book. The better the book, the better. And some kind of a journal, even can be pretty or witchy, or it can just be a striped notebook, but some kind of place where you write things down will be not only what I say, but the cards that you pull in the course of the week will be a huge part of you developing a comfort level with the cards. So what is the tarot? The traditional tarot deck is 78 cards. One of the best known decks of this century is known as the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which looks pretty much like this deck right here. This is a variation of that deck. There's hundreds and hundreds of years of tarot history, but when we say a traditional deck, I'm basically talking about a deck made in this image. That is 78 cards. Those 78 cards are divided into two groups. They are known as the major arcana and the minor arcana. The major arcanas are the ones that show up in the movies, the lovers, the death card, etc. And the minor cards rarely show up in the movies, even though they're honestly much more practical in your day-to-day life. They just don't get the same press. The minor arcanas, there are, I want to say that there's 56 of them, and they come in 4 suits. That would be 4, just like modern playing cards. So the minors have 4 suits, and those suits are 10 cards that go ace to 10, and then 4 people cards. Those ace to 10, those cards are usually known as the pips. Like those are the ones, again, that if you were playing poker with or whatever, and you said, hey, look, I've got a 3 of diamonds, I've got a 10 of clubs. Those cards are all known as minors or pip cards. The people cards, which we're going to get to later, those are things like, your kings and your queens and so forth. Again, you'll recognize them from the modern playing deck. Sometimes they're known as court cards, noble cards, face cards. Why so many names? Well, partly because so many different cultures have had tarot as part of their history for hundreds of years, right? So the French obviously used, one set of terms, as compared to, the English or the Italians. So all the suits even have different names, but generally majors, minors, pips, people cards, that's kind of the basic family tree, shall we say. So some of the cards and their meanings have remained fairly constant over the centuries. Some have evolved a lot to match the times. An example is the High Priestess card, which we'll come to eventually. Long ago, that card was known as the Lady Pope or the Papess. Nowadays, the notion of the female pope as either a myth or a literal figure in history, a lot of people don't even know about that. It's so not part of our daily awareness that card developed another name over time, the High Priestess. So a modern traditional deck tends to have pretty codified, meaning fairly established names. If you got a deck from 400 years ago, you would know it was a tarot deck, but there'd be a bunch of stuff in there you were like, I'm not quite sure what the analogs are. The cards evolve, and that's important because we are lucky to be working with the cards in a time when some of the built-in injustices that were in the cards that we inherit because they are old, the sort of aristocratic notions and sexist notions and so forth that were built, sort of baked into the cards during, medieval and Renaissance times, those things get to evolve. So and that, as you will see, is a really good thing. As the cards change, they give us an opportunity to function as sort of a really fascinating mirror for how we choose to interpret our lives and the events. It's important to ask yourself, if you're interested in the tarot, like, why do you think the tarot works? And yes, you get to say tarot and tarot interchangeably. That's how I learned it from my teacher. Depending on the context. That's how my teacher said it, and that's how I invite you to use them interchangeably. It is rarely tarot. If somebody talks to you about their tarot cards, they perhaps have never heard it pronounced. But tarot and tarot. You may be wondering for yourself, like, why they work. And that is really a personal question. It depends, if you're a person of faith, of religion, if you're spiritually inclined, psychologically inclined. Some readers feel that they are calling on their own imaginations. Some people, talk to their patron saints, their ancestors. Really depends what you believe. My personal practice of many years is built upon the conviction that each one of us knows far more about ourselves and the world than we acknowledge with our rational minds. So the cards, it's not often that they're plucking mysterious information from the secret pages of the book of life, but usually it's like, oh yeah, that's that thing that I knew and I'm in denial about. They're a great way to actually take a good look at ourselves in honesty. Sometimes you will get those magic, like, whoa, I can't believe I'm seeing that moments in the cards. But often I feel that it's really just that we have a lot of wisdom that we aren't comfortable taking ownership of, and the cards help you with that. With that in mind, I would like to mention that while the tarot is a useful tool, it is a tool. In my conviction as a person who has made a tarot deck, tarot cards are not conscious entities. I know some people are extremely careful and sort of superstitious about their decks. If that is your way, you are of course welcome to continue with your way, whatever works for you. But as a person who made a tarot deck, I can tell you, I spent years and years and years deep in the study, but I made these. They're made of paper. They don't have intrinsic power. They are symbols that we sort of collectively have agreed upon over hundreds of years. And they just need to be treated with the respect that you would accord to any tool. You know, a chef keeps their knives clean and sharp. You shouldn't throw your tarot cards down on a table covered in sticky syrup, but that's not because of mystical concerns so much as practical ones. So you are welcome to develop whatever practice and sort of protocol you like over time. But I do know some people are very like, I almost want to say paranoid about the cards. And I would love to, as a person who owns dozens of tarot decks, I would love to discourage you from being afraid of something that was made by a person just like you and me. Any questions about any of that? Okay. So the next thing I want to cover before we, again, get into talking about the cards themselves, what are the rules around tarot? This notion, of like, are the cards mystical? Are they holy? Are they scary? Any of those things, or are they just practical tools? There are no rules. You will find in many texts over many centuries, there are lots of suggested ways that you can interact with the cards. And again, different cultures, different time periods had their own conventions. The Victorian, mystics were very keen on, like, they would, do an incantation to their guardian angel, holding their ritual knife over the cards and, do a lot of that sort of thing. Somebody else might smudge the air with, burning rosemary or sage, or put down a fancy tablecloth. You can develop whatever protocol works for you, but don't ever let anybody tell you that there is one way that it is to be done. Every reader develops their own style, even if it is based on what they learned from a teacher or a text, if that makes sense. So there's no rules about how to read. There's no rules about how you store your cards. There's no rules about how you acquire or maintain your cards. Everything comes down to what helps you be in a receptive and empathetic mindset, and what allows your cards to function cleanly, like energetically, and also just hygienically, tidily, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So there's no one particular way, in chaos magic, which is a sort of modern post-punk spiritual system, if you want to think about it that way. Chaos magic says, like, nothing is true and everything is permissible. It's a way of encouraging spiritually inclined or metaphysically inclined people to still shake the foundations of things and check your results and so forth. So be adventurous. I like to pair that notion with Wheaton's Law, named for Will Wheaton, the famous actor, which is don't be a dick. So if you are using your cards to ask about other people's lives, ask yourself, is it appropriate for me to be asking about someone else's life? Would they consent to have me root around for this information? You will also develop a sort of personal moral compass as you work with the cards. Logistically, those guidelines, not laws, not rules, but they basically come down to acquire, do not steal a book and a deck that you like. Keep them clean and dry. Spend time with them, because the more time that you work with your cards, the more familiar you will be with them, and clear your minds of both distraction and ego when you sit down to work with them. So now, if you want to get your cards out and fiddle with them, you're welcome to do that. I am going to give you a walkthrough of the minor cards. So that is your ace through tens. I am just checking. All righty. Okay. Hold on. I just got somebody checking in about the class. Yeah. Okay. We're good. Thank you for bearing with me. So many screens. So ace through 10. If you're a numbers sort of person, then this may be useful for you now. I always like to point out that I read cards for years without ever really thinking about the numbers themselves having meaning. If you think about your minor cards, they go ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And those numbers have a meaning. All of your ace cards, Your aces are the seed or the beginning. When you get ace cards in a reading, whether it's an ace of wands, pentacles, whatever, aces always suggest a fresh start. So if you get a reading that's chock full of aces, then that is the universe really doubling down on the message for you around fresh beginnings.
Hey, Onça, I have a question.
Yes, please.
But when you say somebody's an ace at something, it's like they're an expert.
It's true. There's a lot of interesting idiomatic language around the aces. The World War flying ace up your sleeve.
Yeah, yeah.
Those all come from so tarot. Way back in the day, tarot was originally a parlor game. It was, like people still play tarot. It's a trumps taking game, and it was an Italian game called tarocchi. So it was for gambling. It was a parlor game. It evolved into one part of the tarot tree became a little bit more divination oriented, which is more about doing the kind of work that we're doing of self-reflection. And then the other part of that family tree became the modern playing card deck.
Oh,
so in the context of gambling, then, like getting 4 aces is, to win, right? So in that context, the aces are a real power card. In the context of the sort of divination, it's really more about the raw power, if that makes sense. It's like when they come up in a reading, they're not saying you're an expert, but they're saying that you are full of burgeoning potential.
Like potential or beginnings, potential.
Exactly. Okay. So thank you for bringing that up. It's a great point, because like, how did it go from potential to mastery? It's really because of the gambling component. That is part of our shared history. And this is one of the reasons that I love to get folks to understand sort of that tarot is can be a really amazing, sassy tool for spiritual growth and so forth. But the tarot, it's kind of gritty. I mean, it was in there elbows to elbows with gambling, right? So you can get really deep with it and really, you can get really deep with it, but it's useful to always remember that, it started out as a thing that, rich people did for fun. So aces, again, we've got potential. That whenever you get 2s cards, be it the 2 of swords, 2 of pentacles, whatever, 2s are about discovery. And if you are so inclined to just jot these down, it means that like between now and next week, you will already be able to read something about half the cards in the deck. Aces are the beginning, that raw potential. 2 is discovery. It is the part where you step into understanding something about your life. 3s are growth. It's the part where you go, hey, I have learned how to walk. Now I can run. Now I can do more with these newly developed feelings or projects or ambitions, depending on whatever suit comes up. So 3s are always speaking to that notion of personal growth. Sometimes it's painful growth, but it's always growth. 4s are stability. When we get 4s in readings, I always say it's stable like a table. It's like a plateau moment where in the context of the cards, you're at a place where you can look around and go, I made it all the way to 4. This is what I have wrought. How do I feel about the thing that I have built or what I'm experiencing? And then we get to the 5s. 5s are chaos cards. And let me know if I need to slow down or speed up. I'm a very fast talker, so don't hesitate to ask me to pace it back. 5s are chaos. When those cards come up, it typically means that all of the stability, lessons, everything that you've built in your personal understanding of the universe between ace 2, 3, and 4 gets upended by some form of conflict or unexpected information. So 5s, while not intrinsically negative, they always speak to disturbance in the force. And then 6s are wisdom, because when you get 6s, you have lived through all of the other bits. Those 6s suggest that you've lived, you've loved, you've lost, now you're wiser. So 6s are wisdom. 7s My teacher, Kate Nordstrom, used to refer to them as vortex cards, but a useful way to think of them is as cards of evaluation. Again, you're experienced, worldly, you get to stop and look at your situation and go, this is what I've built. I'm almost at the end. Is that what I meant to do? Do I need to make adaptations? How do I feel about what I've made? The 8s are about evolution. That 4 is the super stable table. Think about twice that. Now it's twice as many legs. So that 8-legged table is built on a lot of learned experience. The 9s tend to be the fullest expression of the energy of the suit. By that, I mean that, for example, if you're talking about cups, the suit of cups is about emotions and connectivity. In the 9 of cups, we see a person who is fully emotionally satisfied, fully emotionally supportive, is fully able to give unto others because they themselves are well resourced emotionally. It is the full expression of the suit. And then the 10s tend to be sort of the resolution. It's like the culmination of the experience that you can have in that suit. Sometimes, as we may see, it's almost, the banana is now almost so overripe that the 9 was the perfectly ripe banana. The 10 sometimes is almost a little composty. So the 10s are a little hyper powered. Questions about that?
Does a 10 suggest that you've gone too far down the path, whatever that the suit is suggesting?
That's a great question. As we'll see when we get into them, I mean, like the 10 of Cups is a pretty great card. The 10 of Pentacles is a pretty great card. Like those are cards that benefit from being turned up. It's like you can almost think of the numbers as amplification. Like Ace is really quiet. You're turning it up. It's more and more intense. By 9, it's fully loud. And with, for example, Cups and Pentacles, we'll see in those cards, turning it up a little higher just means more happy, more abundance. But if you're turning up Swords, where it's, decision making and responsibility, you turn that up one more and it's too much to bear. So it's really just about amplifying the energy of the thing. So sometimes they get more and more better, and sometimes they get more and more painful. Because the numbers don't bring a value judgment to it about whether it's good or bad. They just sort of inform the quality. Like, is it a stabilizing number? Is it a wildly chaotic number? Is it a number of too much? And now, if you've been thinking this whole time, like, all right, I hear a lot of talk about numbers, but what are these suits that we're talking about? The minor arcana, those 56 cards, the minor arcana, that Ace through 10, then they've got their people cards that go with them. That whole business, those are called suits. So there's an Ace through 10 and King of Pentacles. Pentacles tend to represent practical matters. If you ask me a question about love and relationships in a tarot reading and you get all Pentacles, then I know that whatever question you think you're asking, the answer is about the practical matters. It's not about how you feel. It's about what you need to do. So Pentacles are health and wealth. If anybody out there, does like Dungeons and Dragons and that sort of thing, I like to think of this as the gold coins and hit points. It's like the spoons that you have, of energy. So Pentacles are resources, security, health, and wealth. The Wands, on the other hand, they represent the element of fire. And these are the traditional classic European elements. Obviously, in China, they had similar but different elements. They had 5 of them during the same time period. But so for our heritage coming out of Europe is that there's 4 sort of classic elements. So we find with fire tends to be career, ambition, passion. So if you are asking me, about starting a business or pursuing some giant driven project and you don't get any wands, I'm going to wonder why. Again, not intrinsically bad, but you would expect in matters of ambition to see a lot of wands cards. Now, the cups traditionally represent water or liquid and feelings, emotions, relationship, connectivity. It can be relationships with others, but it's also, our relationship to ourselves. And then we come to swords. Swords is that fourth suit, and that represents the suit of air. That is decision-making, the powers of the intellect, the power of the spoken word, and boundaries. Many of the swords cards are quite fraught, as we will see. They tend to come up, describe a lot of the difficulties we get ourselves in as people who have been taught to value thinking over feeling. So I think perhaps that our reliance on the intellect to make all our decisions for us sometimes gets us in trouble. So we've got our 4 suits there. Again, that is wands, pentacles, wands, cups, and swords. Those go ace through 10. So right now, if you were to just pull out those 40 cards and do a reading for yourself, you could learn something right there from just going, oh, I got the 9 of swords. Well, that suggests that's a really big expression of this suit that speaks to intellect and boundaries and communication. That would give you a little bit of a flavor about what's there. As you get to know the cards by spending time with them, you will start to pick up more of the imagery and so forth that has accreted to them over the centuries. But just that grid of sort of numbers going one way and the suit knowledge going the other way, you've already got something to start working with.
So would 9 of swords means you're decisive or indecisive?
The 9 of swords tends to be, because again, with our 9, we find ourselves like in a very full expression. So it's going to be a full expression of being choicey.
Okay.
And
so then what would 10 of swords then be?
It is a card of excruciating agony as a result of the choices you have made. It is that, again, it's that sort of intellectual power separated from, any feeling and compassion, any of these other things, sort of pushed to its limit. It's almost like the science for its own sake that built the bomb, so it's an extreme expression of intellect.
Okay, cool.
Right. And just folklorically also, sometimes the 10 of swords for homespun people who were using playing card decks, like if you had your great Appalachian grandma and she was using playing cards to tell your fortune instead of tarot cards, that is sometimes the one known as the death card.
Ooh.
It's not literally a card of death, but when it comes up, you're usually feeling pretty poorly about things. So again, there's lots more information that layers on top of that, but just knowing, all right, this card is about evolution. This card is about evaluation. This card is about career. You can start to feel your way through. It's like you've built a cargo net to kind of start to hang some of all of this other cultural information on. Now, let's talk about the people cards, and we could honestly spend a whole month just working on the people cards, but I want you to at least get a chance to think about them. The people cards in the deck, so you've got those 4 suits. They each, in a traditional deck, they have 4 people cards. That's something like a king, or in my deck, they are sages. That is something like a queen. They are sibyls. And then the other ones get a little wibbly wobbly. It's usually a knight or a prince, and a princess or a page. So the king and queen tend to be fairly absolute. And as you can deduce in a modern playing deck, the 2 sort of younger aspects get rolled into one thing, which is your jack. That card's doing the duty of 2. So the people cards, again, also called nobles, or There's a person waving their arms around in my yard. Well, I think they're being attacked by chickens. The noble cards tend to represent people in your life. So there are 16 people cards. They line up fairly neatly with the Myers-Briggs personality test, if you are interested in or familiar with that, which is a sort of post-Jungian way of looking at whether people are, thinkers or feelers, introverts or extroverts. The Myers-Briggs is a whole way of looking at personalities. The important thing to know about the people cards is that they represent different aspects of how we might go about learning, feeling, thinking, doing, etc. For example, the pages or princesses, like if you think about the sort of most youthful aspect of those 4 cards, and if you have a deck with them, by all means, pull out your people cards now so you've got a frame of reference, because the language will be different for each person's different deck. The pages or princesses tends to be a excitable, youthful, like hungry to learn, hungry for experience, but not extremely worldly personality type. So that is, it's like any of us at the beginning of our learning curve, or some of us, who may remain sort of tender and excited about things all the time. That is a personality type. So the princesses and pages tend to represent that student, like I'm here to learn, I'm here to experience things, I'm totally new at this. The knights or princes, usually a person on some kind of a horse, or I've got a deck where they're on all kinds of animals. Those guys, I always say that's the teenager with a car. They know some stuff. They think they know more than they do. Those personality types are prepared to learn what they don't already know by running into it headlong. So the knight is ready to charge out of the driveway and test their ideas against the world. So those personality cards tend to come up when you yourself need to get your, rouse up some sort of fearless pluck and willingness to try, or when there are people in your environment where you can expect that, from a boss or a sibling or whatever. Queens or sibyls tend to be about mastery of the self, mastery of the interpersonal realms, like how they connect with other people. And then the kings or sages tend to be about leadership that is pointed outward, like more hierarchical forms of leadership, and more of the, I think we should go over here. Whereas the queen might be like, we'll be more powerful if we all go over here. And basically, you just have to spend a lot of time with the people cards to get to kind of know them. It's like being at a party with any 16 people. When you get to know them after a while, you'll start to figure out the ways that they're like, the ways that they're different, the conversations that you definitely want to have with this guy and not with this lady, because everybody has their own strengths. In my opinion, the people cards are the most complex cards to read in the entire deck. So if you keep coming up against them and being like, I still don't have it, it's because they're hard.
Oh, so the sage is like the princess?
The sage is like the king.
The sage is like the king.
Yep. So
right. Okay. Sorry. Oops, sorry. I messed it up.
That's all right. So the sage is like the king. The sibyl
and the sibyl's like the queen.
Yep.
Okay.
The seeker, he's charging off on his steed.
That's the seeker. Okay. Yeah. All right.
That tends to be the ready to make full contact with the world in order to figure out what you do and don't know.
Okay.
Fear tends to be more in the learning, perceiving.
Oh.
Rather than doing something with your fists out.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm glad that you asked that question.
Okay.
So I know I'm giving you a ton of information. This is sort of a lecture style right now. Because if you're new, I want to make sure that you aren't unfamiliar with anything that rolls up in your deck. As time goes on, we'll have a chance to really get in and to know the cards more individually. And that will be great. But first, it helps to understand the sort of structure, like the scaffolding that the cards are on. there is a book that I can recommend if you come upon yourself really struggling with the people cards. Mary Kay Greer, which is Greer, she wrote a book called Understanding the Tarot Court. And she is one of the preeminent tarot authors in the world, as you have probably heard me say before, if you've taken a class with me before. And incidentally, my deck is part of the illustrations in that book. Oh, and I did the cover of that book too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was like, look, it's like having the Dalai Lama tell you that you're spiritually okay. If Mary Greer thinks your tarot stuff is good, then that's great. Now let's take a minute to talk about the major arcana. The majors, if you got a deck in front of you, those are the, again, the Fool and the High Priestess and the Justice and all those ones that are sort of flashy. The best way I can think to describe what they do, arcana, the word arcana in this context means secret. So the minor arcana, all those other guys, our pips, our aces through tens and the people cards, those are like the day-to-day secrets. They're kind of the like day-to-day, how you might want to problem solve things in your own life kind of cards. The major arcana, if someone was making a movie of your life, it would be about the arc that the major cards are describing. The minor cards are like the scenes in between. They're like, this is how things express themselves. But the major cards are like, you are here to deal with your issues with your dad. Or, you are here to fully realize yourself from a person who is hungry for information and underinformed to someone who is a master of their domain. Like those are the big arcs. The major cards speak to those. And there's a lot of work that you can look up online if you're so inclined about the Fool's Journey, which is a sort of Joseph Campbellian way of looking at the journey of the Fool through the major cards. The major cards start with the Fool, which is the 0 card. And they usually go all the way through, they're all numbered 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, blah, 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 all the way to 21. And the 21 card is usually known as the world. In my deck, it's the universe, because of course, the world used to be the biggest thing they knew about. So I rounded it up to universe. And of course, really now we know it's multiverses, but how many people are we going to fit on this one card? So we're going with the universe. And so that journey is, if you imagine that you are the Fool, the person who's like, golly, I'm here to learn about myself. I don't know anything about the world. I am that sort of, white clown. As you go through all of the experiences of meeting father, meeting mother, experiencing community, experiencing, partnership, experiencing siblings, struggling with social issues like, justice and all these kind of things, love, loss, the Tower card, the death card, the devil card, which is addiction. As the Fool experiences all of these different cards, by the time they get to the universe, they have done all of the things and they understand what it is to be a fully realized adult. A person who has had to confront all of these different aspects of the sort of humanoid experience. So that Fool's Journey is a whole sort of adventure of its own. And when we're done, if you're inclined, or this week, you may want to get your major cards out and lay them out in order. If you have one of the old versions of my deck, those cards are actually not numbered, but if you look up any conventional, just like Google up quick, any conventional tarot numbering, they'll be listed out. The ones that are about to come out, I got the numbers on there. So that journey for the Fool is a really cool way to learn a little bit more. And it's like, you can almost think of those cards when they come up for you as being like what the work you're here to do at this time. As you start to work with cards for yourself or your loved ones, you will probably see the same, like 5 major cards will come up over and over for you. Because you may be here dealing with your issues with, fascism, or issues with your dad, or issues with extractive capitalism. And you're going to get lots of Emperor cards and lots of Devil cards and lots of Tower cards, because those cards are there. They give you a language, dream language, to describe a certain set of issues. If you are having more of a personal spiritual journey, then you might spend a couple years being like, it's the Hermit and the Hierophant and the High Priestess all the time. As you sort of resolve those issues in your life, those cards will recede into the background, and you'll have a different cast of cards that come up for you over and over. So if you read cards every day for the next 360 days, there are still cards in the deck that would almost never come up for you because they're not part of the journey that you're on at this time. This is why a tarot journal is incredibly important. Even if you're not a person who like writes, diary style on the reg, as you work with your cards, it'll be really useful to at least make a note of what cards come up for you. And that is actually a thing that the Golden Thread app is really useful. It will actually log for you the cards that you pull in the app. So you don't have to physically put, pen to paper if you're not so inclined. All right, we've got about 10 minutes. I know I just downloaded a ton of fundamental information to you. There's more, but I wanted you to be able to at least spread all your cards out on the table and sort of know how they fit together. What are the questions or concerns or adventures that you have in the 10 minutes that we have? I've stuffed your ears with so much information.
Like being a number geek that I am,
Yeah.
like I wonder about like the relationship with the numbers to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's powers of 2, multiples of 3. I don't know. You always hear that 7's like a lucky number, 3 is one of the lucky numbers. Like there's good numbers and not so good numbers.
Sure.
Like it's kind of numerology stuff or something like that. Like how does that play?
Absolutely.
Does that play into any of this?
It totally can. So, and I'm sure you're familiar with the word gematria, like sacred math.
I hadn't actually heard of that, but I don't know. I've read stuff that refers to that kind of stuff. So
yeah, for sure.
All right.
So the thing about that is that if you're a numbers person, you can dive really deep. Like I said, it didn't even really occur to me to pay that much attention to the numbers. My partner is extremely mathy and like loves to do their taxes and so forth. So they really were like, oh yeah, well, I always think of it as like, the 2s and like 2s are like this. And then, the 6 is like kind of tripled down on the quality of the 2. And I was like, after 20 years of reading cards, I never thought of it that way because he sees numbers differently than I do. So you definitely get to bring your experience of numbers to it. And there is, of course, numerology, which is the whole study of like what numbers mean in a mythic sense.
Okay.
Again, Jung was very big on this sort of the way that our built-in spirituality uses numbers to communicate things to us. So you can totally lean into that. Also, if you're astrologically inclined, there's a ton of work that you can do there. I am slow to arrive at astrology. I've just come to accept that that is a big part of tarot culture for some people. Astrology and the study of numbers as a way to, as a lens to look at our lives are ancient. Tarot's only, 500 years old. So compared to astrology, which is legit like 10,000 years old, you get to decide how many things you're going to try to learn at once.
Okay.
So again, if you're astrologically inclined, you can totally dive deep into that. If you're numerologically inclined, there's even tarot decks that work hard to bring together like the Kabbalah, like this is sort of Hebrew mysticism, of letters and numbers, herbalism.
Wow.
You can keep laying it on there. When I made my deck, I wanted to make it super accessible to somebody who had zero woo-woo. If you didn't know anything, you didn't know that you were born in Aquarius, I wanted you to still be able to go, hey, this was useful. So you could totally go into that, but we're going to sort of stay near the surface level of it just because we only have the 4 weeks.
Oh yeah, I just wondered like about the numbers though. Okay.
Oh, yeah. No, it's an excellent question. I'm very grateful that you brought it up. Anybody else? Other questions? We've got like 5 more minutes. I have material I can present to you. I just want to make sure that you get a chance to ask me about your questions. If you look at your notes, in 2 hours, will they still make sense to you? Well, let's talk for a second then about the logistics of readings, that'll be a subject that we get to our next class tonight. If anybody's planning to stay for the next topic, it's going to be really about digging in and doing readings with cards. I will mention here that, again, there's no right or wrong way to read your cards. I personally prefer reading for other people to reading to myself. You may find the opposite. You are welcome to let other people touch your cards if you want to, or some people prefer to keep them sort of energetically, totally, close to their own chest and read cards for people. Before the pandemic, I let other people handle my cards all the time. Now I don't because germs, but that is in part because I know my cards so well, right? I mean, I literally made them. So I'm not particularly worried about them like picking up anybody else's energetic cooties, maybe just their like actual COVID cooties. So like I like to read for other people more because when I read for other people, I'm more disciplined about arriving in being fully present for them. And therefore I feel like I'm a better reader. Whereas when I'm reading for myself, I really have to work to sort of slow down the, mom multitasking machine and prioritize myself. Some people read out loud. So like I do, which is to say, like in my case, if I'm reading your cards, I'm going to say, well, we see here, this is the Two of Cups. The Two of Cups is very much about like being willing to, reach out and trust again, being emotionally available. Like I'm going to talk my way through the deck because I assume people want to know, they want more information. And that's how my brain works. I'm a communicator. Some folks are going to look at the cards and go, okay, so I can see that you're having some overall, power struggles at work. And you're like, which one of the cards says that? They are sort of, they're instead of talking to you about the ingredients, they're just talking to you about the cake. So you may be a cake reader, somebody who like sort of sees the whole thing as one presentation. I like to see the parts and explain them to people because it's pedagogy. I just like to make sure that people have the tools. You could go home and look at the cards and be empowered to continue to explore. So any other questions? Well, I have a question for you. Has this been useful for you so far?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Great. Oh, look, there's somebody.
Definitely.
Fantastic. Okay, well then we're going to take a 3-minute break so I can run to the restroom and come back. I'm just going to turn off my camera. If you're inclined to stay for the is everybody staying? Is anybody staying?
I'm staying.
Yes. Okay, great. The second class, we're going to be talking about how we build tarot spreads, like how you might lay the cards down. It's a little bit more of an advanced topic, but it's not anything that any of you can't handle. It's just assumes that you will put in some time and get familiar with your cards and then be ready to throw them down. Okay, so I will see you in 3 minutes. Thank you. So I am back. Welcome if you just got here. Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome aboard. I have been given guest stewardship of this chicken for a few minutes while my kid runs out to the coop to lock in the big birds. So this is a baby bird.
Oh.
His name is Kaboom because it's a reckless little bird.
Oh, tiny little girl, isn't she?
Yes, they're about 4 weeks old. So like when it's a full-size chicken, its back is going to be all the way up here. But right now it's just a little baby, right? So hopefully the kid gets back before it poops on me because it is a chicken. If that happens, I'll have to, sprint off for just a second. Yes, cheeky Kaboom. So this little one, there were 18 chicks in the brooder, and this one was the bully. So our friend said, here, take this one and keep it away from the others until they all are big enough to keep up. So this little bruiser, there you go, say bye-bye, Kaboom. Bye-bye, Kaboom. There you go. Yes, visit by the stunt chicken. Yeah, I think it's a rooster, unfortunately, but we're going to show him the best time we possibly can. Because we're not allowed to have roosters in the city, so we'll have to see what happens. Hopefully the rest of them are a little more mild-mannered and ladies. It's an Australorp for anybody who's interested in the cult of chickens. Okay, so welcome aboard, anybody who's just joining us now in time for the Chickie Cameo. So this next session is about spread craft. So the previous hour, we were just getting everybody caught up on some of the fundamentals about, the structure of the deck, the suits, a little bit about the superstitions around the cards and etiquette and so forth. And now we're going to talk about building tarot spreads. For the folks that have just joined us, I would love to find out where you are as far as being a reader. Are you beginner? Are you intermediate? Are you professional level? Like, how would you describe yourselves? Everybody wants to sound off and just let me know.
I'll read for myself.
Okay.
I read for myself. I still consider myself not a total beginner, but certainly not even intermediate.
Okay, that's totally fair. Anybody here a very new? Kate, okay, great. There you go, Anne, now I can see you. And thanks for being here, Susan. Great. Okay, well, so for me, again, if anybody who's joining us just now who doesn't already know me, my name is Madame Onça, and I am the artist and co-author of the World Spirit Tarot, which was one of the first decks to commit to the notion that representation matters and inclusivity is a thing. All the tarot decks at the time were full of thin, rich white people, and I just felt like they were not reflecting the diversity of my human experience, and I wanted to do something more. So a lot of my artistic and teaching practice over the years has been committed to trying to find ways to have those conversations. Which brings us neatly to the subject of spreadcraft. We are inheritors of, again, hundreds of years of tarot culture, and there are literally thousands of spreads that you can pick from. A spread is a positional way of reading the cards. We inherited thousands of these. There are a couple of very popular ones, but you get to build the spread that you need. And it's not a thing you might do on your first day of working with cards necessarily, just because you're trying to get familiar with the cards as individual players without actually writing a play for them. But getting to build the spread that you need is kind of like being able to make your own, poultices for a wound at home. Like, yeah, you could just go use a spread that already exists, and sometimes that's the thing to do. But if you have the option to make something that works for you out of the tools that you have forged in your own life, how cool is that? It's very consistent with our sort of DIY values. Now, when it comes to readings, for myself, what I most often do is I do what I call the dinner table style reading, which is to just, the query, the question is put forth, the cards are shuffled and chosen, and I will pull 3 or 5 cards and just invite all of those cards to sit down at my table. And then I go through them. Let's say it's a question about, I don't know, what's this month gonna hold for me? I pull those 5 cards and they all bring different pieces of the puzzle. It's like inviting 5 people to the dinner table. They share with you what they know. And it is up to me as the reader to sort of piece them all together. That is a non-positional reading. In other words, I'm just inviting everybody in and inviting them all to shout equally. And that is how I learned to read from my teacher. And that is how I have read when I do corporate gigs and so forth. That is what I do most of the time. I will do what is called a positional reading, which is what we're going to be working on today. If I am working one-on-one with a client or trying to like pick apart a particularly sticky issue. So again, to clarify, a dinner table style reading is non-positional. I just get all the cards there, irregardless of where they are, select some cards in accordance with the reading and ask them all what they think. A positional reading, each card revealed is interpreted relative to where they fall. Really? There's a cat sitting outside the door meowing. I'm a big magnet for animals tonight. So relative to where they fall. In other words, as each card is laid down, it's focused on a different aspect of your question. If you're familiar with the old classic chestnut, the Celtic Cross, which is one of the most famous, it's one of those readings that you'll see in the movies. That one is very like, this card represents me, and this is the card that crosses me, and this is the thing that came behind me, and this is the events that are upcoming, and this one represents what my family issues have to bear. Like, it's a very elaborate reading that presents a huge amount of information. That is a classic positional reading. But the great thing is, we get to build the positional readings that we want. I never use the Celtic Cross. It's, in my opinion, it's doing too much. It's like putting every kind of ice cream on your sundae till you can't taste anything. Again, I'm gonna let the cat in. Mary Greer is a great author when it comes to studying spreads. Are you coming in? And I know that I have encouraged some of you before to reach out to Interrobang, which is INTERROBANG, Interrobang Tarot. And Interrobang is the name of the punctuation that is an exclamation point and a question mark together. That's actually called an Interrobang when they go together. And the Interrobang Tarot is a great artist, author, and mentor of mine named Evie Martin. She is a master of spreadcraft. I know that Anne, who's in the class here with us, has begun to follow Evie's work. She's awesome. There's also a great resource online, Little Red Tarot. They've got some great stuff about spreads too. So when it comes to building a spread, you as the person asking the question, again, you're going to wish that you had something to write with when you sit down to do this for yourself, because you will be building mental constructs and then trying to keep track of them. A spread needs, first of all, a question. It can be a pretty general question when you are building a spread. Is it, tell me about my job? How will this relationship unfold? I need to know more about my future writing career, etc. So a spread needs a query, like a question, something at the root of it. And a journal, like a way to write it down. Other aspects that you can bring to it, other things to consider, a time frame. Telling me about my job when, like this week, next year, at the end of my life. Like, it helps sometimes to establish a time frame. This week, this month, this year, whatever. Sometimes building a spread, it's useful to pick a shape or a flow that you're working with. So, it becomes like, for example, here's a cute example that I have from Halloween. and I think, Anne, you might have been here for this one last year. So I wanted to make a spread for Samhain, you know, for the sort of end of Halloween season. And the visual that I was using is I wanted it to look like a kitty cat. So I made a positional spread that this card means something, this card means something. And it was a conscious choice. I wanted, this was like foundational. This is like where the cat's haunches are. So I was like thinking about, you know, the sort of the springiness and the root of it. And, you know, up here, like towards its head where you're making decisions. So my positional reading, I was actually building that arc to represent the Halloween kitty. So that is like when you're working with a shape or a flow, or maybe you're thinking about a tree. It's springtime and you want to make a spread that kind of feels like something coming out of the ground. So you're visualizing this and you're going, well, this is the root of the question. And then, you know, this represents my growth because it's literally the trunk of the tree. So you're thinking about a shape or a flow. That's another way to do it. In parentheses, all tarot spreads come down to, is it a line? Is it an arc? Is it a circle? Is it a grid? Whatever you think it is in your mind, whether it's a spiral or, you know, the cosmos or a tree or whatever, when it's laid down, it's going to look like either a bunch of things stacked this way, or this way. But those visuals will be really useful for you in terms of building the poetry, let's say, behind the spread. And then this notion of like questions within questions. That's where you're going to get your chance to flex your cleverness. You've got your general query, you know, tell me about my job, tell me about my writing career, tell this person about what's going on with the relationship. The questions within the questions is going to be the real nub of the gist. And we'll break that down a little bit more. And then I would suggest room for some kind of wild card, like a building into your spread, either a wild card or kind of a blind spot card, something that says, tell me what I'm not already thinking about. You know, what is the unexpected, you know? If I remember correctly, in the original Jurassic Park, part of what happened is that they had built their system to account for making sure there was every dinosaur was accounted for, you know, up to whatever, 397, whatever the number was. Their system wasn't built to account for extra dinosaurs because they didn't know that they could reproduce, right? So the system failure entirely came from not anticipating the wild card. And so know that when you're building a spread, it's always good to have that built-in thing that will help you keep track of the extra dinosaurs. Like, I've made all my plans. Tell me what Joe's going to do. Tell me what Lou's going to do. Tell me how Betty's going to react. Those may give you some information, but they don't tell you about the part of the situation you don't see yet. So building in that sort of pressure release that has the room for the wild card or the you know, the uncertainty principle, that's also useful. So you don't have to fit all of these things into building a spread, but it's good to make some choices and put some of them in there. So let us see. I have a handy dandy note here. Talking about I have visual aids. That kitchen witch dinner table spread. This, for example, is a model of what a typical spread for me looks like that is non-positional. I pulled a bunch of cards and said, hey, you guys, what do you think about my situation? This card makes sense to me. That card makes sense to me. These ones, this one I have questions about. And so my next round of cards that I pull is, hey, card number 3, tell me more about yourself. I pull a couple more cards, same thing. These ones make sense. This one needs some clarification. So I might be like, hey, card number 8, I'm going to pull 2 more. Explain how this is relevant to my situation. Do you see how it's kind of an organically growing way of non-positionally getting information? Does that make sense? I'm going to assume that's a yes.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, this is how I read cards most of the time. And if I'm working with, you know, with face-to-face with somebody, then, you know, we might end up with 12 cards on the table. Non-positional. However, a positional one, let's see. This is a very simple version. A positional one, this is my, a couple different options here. You're like, all right, well, I'm thinking about moving. Should I move to Arkansas? Should I move to Alabama? What have I not thought of? So those are positional cards. When I'm laying them down, as I pick this card up, I'm thinking, hey, tarot deck, or guardian angels, or fairy people, or whatever, subconscious, whatever it is that you think makes the tarot work for you. Hey, cards, talk to me about Arkansas. Talk to me about Alabama. Talk to me about what I'm not thinking of, my wild card. So this is a rudimentary positional spread. Just to get you thinking about that notion that whatever card comes up here, you have to somehow be able to fit this notion of the question, what's it like for me to live in Arkansas, with whatever card comes up. That's where positional cards get tricky. Now, do I have another good one there? So we're going to talk about the constituent card model, that positional model. This is the part where I would love it. I know not everybody's comfortable talking, and that's okay. If you are comfortable talking, I would love to be able to open this part up into a bit more of a discussion. As much as Zoom allows that, we'll put everybody on the equal screen. When it comes to positional modeling, take your question, and maybe you want to jot this down. Pick any question that might be coming up in your life in a big sort of in its larger aspect. What's going on for me with my career, or what's up with my roommate acting so weird. You pick your question, and then what we're going to do is you need to tease it out. This is the visual I always get for this, as if you've got a wad of wool and you're pulling out the sort of different bits of it to make a more three-dimensional understanding of your situation. For example, let's imagine the question is, what will it be like working with so-and-so? You threw a couple deck cards down on the table in that dinner party style. All right, these cards are good. This card looks kind of hard. This card suggests something about the process. Okay, but you can be more specific. You can say, hey, cards, what's it going to be like working with so-and-so? That first card, perhaps you might say, what can I learn from this experience? Second card might be, what are some challenges that I can expect from this experience? What am I not seeing yet in this situation, or what unseen forces are at work in this situation? You can see that those ways of teasing it out are going to give you much more specific answers. So it's almost like you're building you put up like a big arch for your question, and now you're pulling all these different pieces out of it. This is such a hugely useful tool that I have literally never tried to explain. So where's my little map? I just made you a little map. Where did it go? I blame the chicken. That is the darndest thing. Huh. I drew a map for you, but it seems to have slipped away. Anyway, so this is where writing it down becomes really important, because when you may build the most perfect spread in the world to address your situation with your 3 cards or your 4 cards or your 5 cards, positionally specific cards intended to help you see the best aspects of what you're looking at, the challenging aspects, the unseen aspects. You're going to map this out for yourself, but you need to write it down. And what I will do, and what I did do for you, is, I would write down the shape of the spread you're going to do, even if they're just all in a row, and then make myself a key that says, card number 1, what are the challenges I'm going to, what are the unseen things? What is the profitability on this situation like, etc. You write them all down, and that way you don't trick yourself. It's not just a matter of forgetting what you said, because you're doing a lot of mental lifting during this. It's also a matter of holding yourself accountable Because once you start pulling cards, if you get any cards that are kind of scary for you or like or surprising for you, it's very easy for our brains to go, yeah, I don't like that card. I don't even really remember what this one was about. Not because you're trying to be evasive, but the brain, you're already got a lot going on. The brain tends to flinch presented with a lot of wacky data at once. So writing it down, being super clear, helps you to be accountable. Now I have to let the cat out. Excuse me. Let's see if you can find my piece of paper. Where did it go? This is the darkest thing. Here's an example of a positional reading. This one is about jealousy and envy. So you can see, here's the jealousy and envy. I use this opportunity to sort of map out, what do I fear? What do I hope for? What can I learn? So you're teasing out the different aspects. And I don't want to say the good aspects and the bad aspects. That's a sort of a short-sighted way to look at readings. But to do yourself the maximum justice as you're building a spread, you want to think about not just giving yourself the information you want. Tell me how much she loves me is not a fair directive to give the cards. And if you force that sort of logic on the cards, they will get snippier and snippier until they are shouting at you in tarot emojis to tell you that you're being a tool. Better instead to say, tell me how this person feels, like I'm getting the vibe, tell me how they feel about me. Tell me how, tell me how my past history and relationships is coloring my experience of what's happening here. Or see what I mean? Like trying to find some subtler ways to come at it other than just tell me what I want to hear. So once I've got a spread written out, perhaps like this, again, 3 cards, 5 cards, whatever you want to do, I will, my personal process, this has been extremely useful and on my mind the last 2 weeks because of the pandemic, and I was doing a lot of very intensive mentored study over the summer, I was actually able to go back to the journaling I had done about tarot last June. And I could look at those and I could go, this makes so much more sense now. Oh, this shoe still hasn't dropped for me. I could really look at them and be impeccable in my record keeping as far as understanding what the sort of questions I had set in motion for myself, all those 10 months ago or whatever. And I actually revisited all of those today or rather this week based on how they've played out. So at this point, I have my original spread, my attempt to interpret it at the time, my reinterpretation of those things that are still relevant for me almost a year later. It was actually, not only was it humbling in some ways, because you're like, oh, it was so obvious and I didn't want to see it at the time, but also really beautiful because I could go, oh, look, I did anticipate that part. And I was able to make adjustments in the course of my life because I had that information. So it was really valuable. So what this looks like for me, you draw your little spread graph, whatever it is, however you want to do your shorthand. You write down your questions. What I then do is I will say, for example, what do I fear here? Let's imagine that I got, the 3 of Swords. 3 of Swords is about, heartbreak and betrayal. So I would be like, I would write down, my first step is write down the question. Second step is write down the card that you got. Third step is interpret the card. 3 of Swords, heartbreak, betrayal. You had a hand in your own undoing, probably because of a lack of life experience. So you write down your sort of shorthand interpretation. And this is where, if you're new to tarot, your Golden Thread or your other books will be really handy. Then I would indulge in a few lines of interpreting the card relative to my question. So, well, I'm afraid of heartbreak and betrayal in this new relationship because, I have a history of emotional damage and baggage around, feeling abandoned or whatever. So you keep it, first it's impersonal. That's you learning how to read the cards and then translate it as you think it might relate to you. So at this point, you've got, little block that answered, everything to do with question 1. do it again for the next one. You know, what do I hope to learn here? What resources do I have? You know, how can I bring my unique queer witchy awesomeness to bear on the situation? Whatever the questions are. So then you've got, again, picture the number, the question, the card, the definition, interpret it relative to yourself. And at the bottom of all of that, I would look back over the 3 or 5 cards and interpret them all together relative to that big question that I started with. You know, what's up with this relationship vibe I'm getting? Or, you know, will I ever fucking be allowed to travel again based on never ending COVID? Like, whatever your question is. So you want to like bring your sort of microscope in really close on the card and then on yourself, and then pan it way back out to that bigger question.
That is so helpful because I laid out a spread, your 12 card wild card, your 12 card wild card.
Yeah.
And I got so distracted by the cards, I totally forgot what I was asking myself.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that because it was such a revelation to me. And, you know, my temperament, you know, I'm in some ways I'm very systematic and very organized. In other ways, I'm just quintessential Gemini, and it's hard for me to do the same thing over and over. Right. Like, but I have found that when it comes to this kind of work, trying to manage record keeping is ultimately is its own reward. Even if it's, I sit for 5 minutes in the car before I go into my doctor's appointment, and that's the time I give myself to do it. Just having that much, or since I have to take my kid to doctor's appointments all the time, I started bringing my stuff with me. So I can at least, you know, instead of just sitting looking at the thumbed over magazines, that is time I can reclaim to do something that has profound meaning in my life, you know, and not feel like I'm wasting my time by taking care of myself. I'm able to steal some of that time back to really make the records and you know, build. Now I've built some structures that I can go, oh, I used those same, once I went through those readings from last year, I was like, well, let's do those same questions again now. And I will be able to develop this sort of long arc view of how I am managing those issues of, you know, privation or security or, you know, concern about family or whatever it is. You get to build a sort of, you see the long sine wave of your own understanding unfold. Anybody else have any comments or questions about that? This is a big, heavy topic. So if you're even still with me, I'm impressed.
I try to do a reading, especially on the solstices and maybe the full moons. And I try to look back at what I was going from the year before and compare the reading and how I feel in here versus what I did last year. And I find they've evolved on the same question, asking the same question again. Emotionally, not right. I never wrote it down, and that's a great idea, but and I'm like, okay, yeah, I've evolved, and that's better now. This is not, and well, guess what? It hadn't changed. It's the same, and I'm like, yeah, it's true.
Because, you know, it could be anything from, you know, these are your seasonal, you know, the shape of your relationship with, you know, how much sunlight you're getting, the shape of your workload, the way that you feel going into, you know, some people hate the summer because they fear the heat. Some people just can't wait for summer because that's when they feel the most alive. But hopefully as you do that, you get to see yourself, you know, at least be a year wiser.
Yeah, I'm reviewing the wheel of the year, you know, and how am I changing and how am I going through the wheel of the year, and the universe card, you know, always connects with me with the wheel of the year too.
That's fantastic. That's a really great idea to let yourself have like annual or seasonal or monthly check-ins, not just for this one year, but, you know, to watch it unfold over several or many. Oh, how I wish I had been keeping records for the last 25 years.
I haven't been keeping records. I'm just trying to check in with my own emotional, where I'm at, and my grounding, centering, and where my focus is and where I'm going in the future.
Oh, thank you for saying that. That reminds me. So when I'm writing down part of the tarot journaling for me, like if you're sitting down to build a spread or whatever, I will write down the date and my personal affect, which is to say, if I'm coming into it like, I'm feeling great and relaxed, it's a beautiful day and it feels like a great time to do some tarot, or if it's like, I am terrified, I am stressed, I am anxious, we're dealing with a serious medical situation, like, I won't write a big journal entry about that, but I will start with that. Because if you've ever worked in a restaurant, well, part of what you do as part of your daily report is like, this is how many meals we served, this is what the weather was. Like actually, Paula will do this even with like tracking all his tips and stuff from fair. He'll make a note of the weather as well as the tips for each show, because it helps him to a much more nuanced sense the next year when he goes back and goes, how was that show? I feel like I remember March was always rainy. He has these much more detailed records, sort of restaurant style. And I have started doing that as far as the weather of my emotional state. It's because it gives you a sense going into the reading. It's like, well, these readings, I'm always doing these ones when I'm super stressed out because I'm struggling with the seasons or struggling with the school year, or, the readings I do on a full moon are always my, like, I've, checked out of my other responsibilities and it's my me time. That's going to affect my affect going into doing the reading. Now, if I'm reading for a client, I try to wipe all that and be purely neutral, a conduit for them, because I'm separating the work I'm doing from how I feel. But if I'm reading about my own life and my own issues, obviously I tend to be, it's going to be colored by the amount of like adrenaline or, stress or joy or whatever I'm bringing to it. So consider writing down a little bit about what's happening in your life as well. Thank you for reminding me.
That's an excellent idea, but I have a totally practical question.
Yeah, please. That's great.
Is there a specific way, how do you shuffle these cards? I mean, is there a specific way to?
There is not one way. And the reason for that is because if you have, like, my cards are big, my hands are not. Some tarot decks are really tiny. Some people are professional prestidigitators. You can always tell the people who are like, Vegas style card players, because they're going to do something different. So what I would say is it depends on your hands, it depends on your dexterity, it depends on the deck. As I like to say, my friend, the Druid Priestess, she reads the cards by throwing them in the air, and the ones that end up face up are the ones she picks. Like, her shuffling style is to let them sort themselves. I tend to just, sort of pass them hand to hand while I'm breathing slowly. And as I do this, because I've done it so often, it is actually telling my nervous system to calm down and arrive. So I'm just doing that. Some folks who like to do reverse meanings, who are like reading the cards upside down, right side up, will actually switch them and do that to ensure that half the cards are upside down. And plenty of folks, well, I won't be able to demonstrate it here, but they'll do the, the thing where you fan them together. You could totally do that. There is no right or wrong way. Again, especially like my cards are wide because of the shape of the art. So, you do what you got to do. Carmel, who I live with, she got this really beautiful artsy deck. She said the only way that it wants to be shuffled is she sets them down and then she smudges them around. She's tried all kinds of different shuffling styles, and that's really what they want. She kind of finger paints them around and then picks her cards that way. So
Are you trying to get a certain number of major arcana and minor arcana in a reading? Do you ever separate them out by that?
No, I definitely don't, because sometimes you'll be like, hey, I just want, I don't know, it might be like, just wondering how, this week's going to go, and you pull 5 cards and 3 of them are major arcana. You want to know if you're going to have a 3 major arcana kind of week. Sometimes they won't come up at all because, this week is not going to be that kind of week. So the only time I pull cards out, dirty little secret, is that if I'm going to do like, a bachelorette party or something, where I'm going to be dealing with lots of high adrenaline, highly intoxicated people who are there specifically to have a good time, I will actually pull out the scariest cards from the deck so that you don't get some drunk crying bridesmaid at the end of the night who got Death, the Tower, and the Devil 10 minutes before her taxi came. Right? And that is, I still try to be as honest with them as I can, but I will ask the cards like, you know, like I took out the bitiest dogs. You can still give me some information. If this person needs some heavy information, I can still provide it. But it's easier for me to be like, oh, wow, let me talk to you about that. Like 9 of Swords being you kind of look like you have a lot going on, rather than like, oh, sorry about the death and devil card. We don't have time for me to deconstruct your phobias around that now. So I will sometimes I'll massage what's in the deck a little bit to protect people if I don't have the time to really get into it with them. But no, otherwise I leave them all in. There are some decks where people, artists, have made just a deck that's just major arcana. And I would like to say that people can do whatever they want, but those decks were made for the joy of the art, not for the utility of the divination. No deck that only has 22 cards is going to give you any kind of nuanced information. But you can be like, I love this fairy art, whatever. I'm totally into Frank Frazetta or Bram Stoker or whatever. You can enjoy it for the art, but like,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So there's a reason we have so many cards in the deck. It's to increase the likelihood of you getting sort of a livable mix.
Have you ever mixed different decks just deliberately? So, I mean, not the same two, like 2 towers or 2 lovers or whatever, but just picked out specific ones and made a mishmash?
I have not read that way. It's a great question, Susan. I never know whether to call you Susan or Amos, because I think of you as Amos. But what I have done is worked with multiple decks on the table at one time. You know, mostly realistically, partly because if you're mixing different decks of different sizes, it gets to be it's just a lot of like admin to sort of sort them back out at the end. But I will use like a, you know, for example, I have probably 4 different Rider-Waite decks, and they're different sizes. Like I've got like a miniature one and a big one. I'll do readings. I'll do one reading with a couple of those decks. So it's like I've pulled some cards here, and then maybe you've got a question about the one in the end, so I can get the little deck and then pull a little set over here and then a different one over here. So I'll put multiple decks on the table, which is actually a well-documented technique because Madame Lenormand, who read for the Bonapartes, used to use multiple decks on her table at once. But I don't tend to get them mixed up together. No, for just because for me, that sounds like a lot of work. As it is, I'm trying not to get all my personal decks mixed up with each other so that I don't end up with, you know, 3 towers in one tarot deck. Any other questions? Questions about building spreads or just tarot stuff in general? I've awashed you in information. I would like to recommend this week, if you're interested in piddling around with stagecraft or spreadcraft. If you've never read tarot cards at all before, just do the you know, yes/no wildcard spread. Like that's a great way to, you know, and the caveat is you have to come to that with a yes/no question or a option 1, option 2 question. That's a great one to say, you know, even if it's something silly, you know, should I get the latte or the chai tea, just so you can practice this notion of exploring multiple opportunities. And if it's, you know, should I go with this dashing swashbuckler or this, you know, super hottie pirate mermaid? Well, good for you. The rest of us will be pulling for chais instead. But exercise this notion of working around options and that wild card, because you want to get used to the notion of saying, all right, universe, you know, talk to me about the things I'm not seeing. Because doesn't that encompass a huge percentage of what we're dealing with in life all the time? It's the thing that we didn't plan for. You know, it's the dinosaur that they forgot to count is the one that's going to give you trouble, right? So work with that. Now, if you're somebody who's already well-versed in spreads, then consider doing this notion of building a spread where you're teasing out sort of little bits of yarn from the whole sort of wad there. And for myself, I found it really useful to actually come up with 3 different big subjects. You know, make it a work thing and a relationship thing and a garden thing, or you know, kids thing, mom thing, resources thing, whatever. Come up with a couple different big questions, tease them out into these 3 sort of subcategories. Remember that you're looking for, you know, what are the great things that I can get through this experience? What are the challenges that I can expect? What are the things I might not know are coming? Or time frame, you know, how's stuff with my, you know, demented grandfather going to look this week, this month, and this year? Like, you can explore time frames, you can explore, you know, the sort of light and shadow aspects of it, but give yourself a couple and try this exercise of writing them down so that you can get used to that process. And then, you know, a month from now, you'll have something to look back at, and you can begin that process of exploring the notion of accountability. I know you don't want to probably do that much writing all the time. I did about 3 months straight, and then I needed to take a little break. But now I'm able to go back to those notes and be like, look at you learning stuff last year.
Do you use a notebook, or do you use a journal type thing, or you just use a kid's $1 out of the Dollar General, or, you know?
Literally all of those things. So my tarot notebook, when I was mentoring, when I was training with Evie, I had like one of my kids' leftover, you know, high school grid notebooks, you know, just like for doing algebra or whatever. I was using that one for that. As a person who has kept sketchbooks for on and off, as well as journals for much of my life, this one is like, it's got my writing, it's got various magic stuff in it, it's got me talking about kids, it's got me drawing, and then there's a section in the middle where I just folded over some pages because I realized I was about to do a whole lot of, like, you know, tarot mapping stuff. You can see like question, question, question. This is me making space to write down all my answers. So all of the above. All of the above work for me. Carmel and also Dana Beaufet, who some of you may know, she's done some classes with us as well. They are the kind of orderly people who like to have a nice notebook with a series of like pretty markers in different colors, you know, like there's the gold pen and there's the purple pen, and they're like color coded within their own pages. And like when Dana is done, one of these pages is a beautiful, like grimoire-esque work of art of its own. I find that so admirable and entirely alien, because that is not what my brain looks like. That's what my brain looks like. So that's what my tarot notebook, my grocery list, my, you know, all my stuff looks like that. What do we got there? Oh yeah, yep. So if you're the kind of person who can make a beautiful grimoire, power to you. But for me, all of my stuff is intertwangled. It is nice if you're doing tarot lesson stuff, try to put that maybe all in one place, because that way you can just kind of grab it and go. But when it comes to working, inevitably, if you really get into this, the work that you're doing in here will, if you're allowing yourself to have some depth, right? If you're really trying to like get into your own stuff or supporting other people with their stuff, it's going to go from being, this is my tarot lesson notebook, to this is personal, right? This is where we're talking about, you know, somebody, you know, how they functioned after their wife died, or, you know, what they're doing with their kid, the drug addict. Like, it's going to get personal and emotional, which is why for me, the distinction, you know, other than this is my class notebook, everything else is my life. But that just depends on how your brain works. Some people do it all online. And again, the Golden Thread has that nice little app where they have a built-in journaling function. If you pull a card, like let's say you pull the, you know, the lover's card, it will say, you pulled the lover's card. Here is the definition. Would you like to log it in your journal? Yes. And then they give you a list of things. How does it make you feel? So you can literally go down and go, anxious, enthusiastic, brings up all my damage. You actually just like hit the list and it files them. So instead of you're typing with your thumbs, it brings up a bunch of stuff for you. So, you know, if you don't want to get all mushy and journally, you can also just kind of bullet point it for yourself. Treat yourself like the app. And just go, yep, here's that card I always get. It makes me feel anxious, nervous, excited, nauseous, like I need to go do some push-ups. So finding a system that works for you. Oh, and there's a thing that I do for my personal self, and I've been doing this for many years. can see I didn't plan to put this in this presentation, but it may be useful. Long before I did tarot, I developed a shorthand in my journals so that I could be glancing through and go, oh, this is about how I feel. Like, this is about how I feel. This is about what I think. This is about my heart. This is about my spirit. This is about the meat puppet that I live in. So I would actually mark, like, once I've written a whole passage, I would make a mark in the corner about it. Now, of course, I realize they basically equal the ones for the tarot. So it was, you know, these ones were about my emotions. These were about my body. This was about my thought process. And this was about my sort of spiritual life and thinking. And so you can certainly do something similar when you make a shorthand, you know, in your journal and you go, it's got a big black X, it's about work, you know, or if it's clearly a cat face, it's about my awesome job, you know, as a lab tech, whatever. So finding your own way to track things where you can find them again. You can be creative. Any other questions? We've got about 15 more minutes. I'm going to let the cat in. They really want to be in here, and then they really don't. Come on in. Yes, come on in. This is a different cat than the other cat, and a different, it's not even a chicken. When it comes to, I know that some of you were in class when we were talking previously about like a daily tarot practice. If this whole spreadcraft business of feels like a lot right now, or if you just want more tools, one of the things you could do is a tarot card a day practice where you pull one. Golden Thread will let you just pull a card a day and, you know, do it in the app. But if you're excited to get your hands on actual cards, it can be in the morning, it can be in the evening, you can do it while you're eating your cereal, whatever you want. What you can do is you get your deck, shuffle it around, you know, and find your own way. And you basically say, hey, cards, what do I need to know about today? I've got like 10 minutes. What do I need to know? You'll pull a card, get your book out, write the date, write the card. This is a place where it's great to have several books if you've got time. You know, we have a whole library here. So some days I'll, you know, grab, you know, the Thoth book and the Rider-Waite book and the Cosmic Tribe book, have a couple different resources. Write down what each book has to say about that card. Also write down what it looks like to you. Does it look like your mom? Does it look like your cat? Does this image make you profoundly uncomfortable? And if so, can you figure out why? So take a few minutes to interpret it based on the texts, to interpret it based on how you feel. And here's your next level shit. If you have the time, then what you do is you set your timer on your phone or whatever for, you know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you can do, and stare at the card. Like, you look at the card, you look at the picture, notice everything in it as if you were desperately trying to commit it to memory. It's not just, is there a cat? But, oh, the cat is on the right-hand side. It's over there. The negative space around the cat kind of looks like this. I never noticed before. It looks like maybe that's a fish jumping in the distance. So really look at it as if you were, you know, studying a mugshot. So spend, you know, again, 5 or 10 minutes, like set your timer, because otherwise short attention span theater here means that you're going to flake out of the exercise faster than you think. So set the alarm, look at it, and really get to know it. Then when you've spent your 5 or 10 minutes, shut your eyes or set the timer again for 5 or 10 minutes and try to see it in your eyes, like inside your head. See if you can remember what it looks like. You just read about it. You responded to how it makes you feel. You looked at it deeply. See if you can remember what it looks like. Not only will this help you with really getting the cards deeply wedged in your subconscious where they can help you, you know, as far as like that sort of deep memory, but also later on, it'll be helpful when you're like, somebody says, hey, you know about tarot cards? I just got this 7 of Wands. What is that? What is that about? And you're like, desperately trying to remember what it looks like. If you really spend time with them, and because I'm an artistic person, I would actually do this. And then I would actually, once I'm done trying to picture it in my mind, I would actually try to draw, you know, not the card, but like the shape. Be like, oh yeah, you're right. That's right. I forgot there was a bench and then the boats are there. So you can let yourself really dive into the image, and you can even do that by flipping it upside down and instead of gazing into it as if you were looking at a photograph of a person, just let it be abstract. Look at it as shapes and colors, because when the artist colored it, they were making choices. The colors have messages for you too, right? If the card is overwhelmingly yellow and orange, that says something to your deep mind. If the card is very, black and silver and blue, that has messages for that part of your mind that responds to this. And if that sounds weird to you, what I mean by that is tarot speaks to us in dream language, right? The tarot doesn't have words to shout at you. If you ask dumb questions over and over again, it will try. But there's no text. It can only give you images. And so those images are the same as, if you have a dream about your teeth are falling out and you're, out in the middle of the sea, you can wake up and go, if that hasn't actually ever happened to you, then it's probably a matter of feeling overwhelmed and feeling out of control, right? Like our dreams try to find metaphors to help us understand things. And tarot cards use that language. So the more that you sort of spend time with them, not only in the literal, but in the abstract, it will actually feed that part of your brain that really wants to help you understand yourself better. Yeah. Questions, comments, concerns?
Does the golden thread, does that app, if you pull your own tarot card, like from the deck, can you go and get a meaning for it, like a list of things from that app?
What you can do, I know what you're asking. You cannot say, hey, golden thread, I just pulled the 3 of Swords at home. Can I enter it into this journal? It won't do that. But what you can do is you can either go, hey, golden thread, I'm getting my card of the day here with one boop, and then you can do it in there. Or you can say, I've got my journal and I'm going to pull my physical card of the day over here and then go over here for a definition. So it won't let you enter these ones. And I'm sure there are apps that do that. That one just doesn't happen to you. That's one that I haven't used it. Like I said, the art is very Silicon Valley. Like it's not my jam, being more of a folkloric person, but when you're designing an app, you know what you want? Silicon Valley. Those people know how to design a well-honed app that will do an amazing number of things.
Cool. All right.
Yeah. And there, you may find other ones that do, there's a zillion tarot apps in the world. That's just one that I have come across that is like clean and very user-friendly. There's also the question of reversals, which is, do you read the cards when they're upside down? Like if you put this one and the third one happens to be this way. That is entirely a matter of personal preference. Statistics indicate that most readers will read reverse cards for some part of their time as readers, but not all. So if you're new, you might not want to take that on because it doubles the amount of things you're trying to memorize.
I like your suggestion on your booklets with your decks, where you read both sides, the light and the dark at the same time, and let the card speak for how it interprets at the situation that you're in. I like that. I look at both sides of that card. I really don't read it. Oh, it's reversed. It's got to be negative. Sometimes it's not, and I don't know if that's legit or not. Yeah. So, for example, to demonstrate that notion, like the 5 of Wands, it's a card of competition. Again, we talked about fives. Fives are chaotic. Wands are ambition. So, what is chaotic ambition? It is people striving against each other. There is such a thing as positive competition, right? That is like making better and more awesome, breeding better and more awesome tomato plants. But then there's full like I took a lead pipe and, knocked your knees out so that I could beat you at the skating competition. That might be considered an unhealthy expression of competition, right? So we've got both of those things are part of the notion of competition. But as Susan is describing, in that situation, you're like, well, I got this. What company is it keeping? If it's surrounded by cards that are clearly full of strife,
and like negation, then I would go, oh, I think that you're keeping bad company, friend. I think the company that you're keeping suggests that you are running with a Tanya Harding kind of crowd, rather than a breeding better, stronger tomato plants kind of crowd. So every one of the cards, in theory, even the Sun card and the Star card, which are like the most benevolent cards in the whole deck, in theory, they all have, you know, the part they're really good at and the part that is challenging, like the Death card. Yeah, death is tough. Radical transformation, a painful evolution, and releasing things from the past. That's scary and painful. But the good part of the Death card is those things are over now. You are moving towards a new future. You know, the banana's all rotted, and that is sad, but the compost is awesome. So as you get to know the cards, you definitely have the option of just sort of asking them, you know, what aspects they're bringing to your personal tarot party. Thank you for bringing that up, Susan. Anybody else? Questions, comments? If you're going to be with us next week, again, I would encourage you to spend some time with the cards between now and then, whatever that looks like. I know that we don't all have sovereignty over all of our time. So, you know, do whatever works for you. You know, you'll just feel more comfortable in class if you have had a chance to spend a little bit more time with them. As always, I'm happy to point you towards Mary Kay Greer as one of the eminent scholars. Rachel Pollack is another one, Pollock, who has zillions of books. And the two of them often teach workshops together on the international circuit because they are two of the shining lights. If you're an Instagram kind of kid, there is a friend of mine in Puerto Rico named Onario, O-N-A-R-E-O, who is LGBTQ Latinx man who has an ongoing Meet the Creator show on Instagram. Like he does Instagram live shows with people who make decks and he interviews them. So it's a nice way, like a very comfortable, people sitting around the table kind of way to learn more about cards and learn more about like why people make the decisions that they make. And it's a chance to hear from a gay Latinx man who's interested in tarot. He lives in Puerto Rico, but speaks very good English. It's a great opportunity to hear different and more inclusive voices. So it's not just a bunch of white ladies yelling to each other about our enlightenment. So I highly recommend that if you are a person who does the Insta. I was one of his guests because he is a fan of my deck, and I was such a little old lady on the Instagram, but it was it was super fun. He's very jolly, very lovable, infectiously joyful kind of guy. So that's a good place to go on the Insta. And of course, TikTok is crawling with witch stuff. But you know, if you aren't super savvy about witch stuff, be aware that not all the things on TikTok are gold. Some of it is, you know, teenagers who are trying to hex the moon or whatever. So just search around until you find something that that speaks to you, whatever medium you're in. Does anybody else?
YouTube stuff? Is there YouTube stuff?
Oh yeah, for sure. In fact, I myself have a YouTube channel that has lots and lots of classes on it.
Oh, that's right. You told me before.
Yeah. Ooh, the Tower reversed today. Yeah, that's an interesting one. There's a lot, and one of the things that you can do, developing discernment in what you're interested in. Like you could spend your whole life from now on just watching YouTube videos on tarot, right? Like there's enough material on the internet to fill the rest of the time that you have in the world. So developing the discernment to figure out what speaks to you and what is useful is really becomes the challenge. Once you find the resources, it's about being discerning. Right. So that's a matter of finding your vibe. Part of what I always look for is if the presenter seems, they could be any age. Like there's some very wise young people and some very silly old people. I mean, it's not about that, but I do try to find diverse voices. I do try to find people who don't seem to have just like, you know, come out of the broom closet 7 seconds ago and are, you know, trying to make a living on it. hopefully it's somebody, you know, you find some people who feel like they've got some real skin and love in the game. Again, actually, that's a place where Onario might be a really good resource, because he is developing a personal relationship with so many people that are creators. That might be a good way to find good people on the YouTubes. I'll just poke around sometimes on YouTube just to see how the kids are doing it. As far as, you know, if somebody has, you know, 2 million hits on their tarot website, you know, or their tarot video, you know, you've got to wonder how they are, like, what is it that people need in order for them to, you know, have that much bandwidth, like accessibility to people. So there's tons of stuff on YouTube. Just try to feel around for something that has integrity. If it feels douchey at all, don't stay.
Yeah.
If it feels like one of those, you know, white light people who wants to be a total bigot while profiting off, you know, other people's cultures and so forth, like, I don't know, maybe don't give them your time. Yeah, we have access to so much information in this time. When I started with tarot, there was no internet yet, you know, so it was like I had to find a lady who had a book and a deck. The part where we get to do this, even in the pandemic, is kind of awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, we have reached our time, everyone. I hope this has been useful. I always want your questions. I have taught every style in the last year, and you know, we got very polished and precise there for a minute, but I really missed having the interaction, because, you know, I know what I think. I want to know what you need to know so I can help you. So please bring me your questions. Please bring people, your friends, if they want to learn about this sort of thing. These classes are just pay what you can. If you can't pay anything, I totally understand. We all have to help each other out the way the world is. If you want to throw something in, I appreciate you. All the information should be in the class announcements. I literally don't even have any tarot decks to sell right now, so it's not about that. I just want to get the information to people so that we can make the world better, more fun, and more empathetic, I guess.
Cool.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Feel free to, you know, DM me if you need anything in particular. Bye.
Bye. Thanks,
Bye.
Onça.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.